Moral consciousness, like intelligence, is a natural endowment, which requires an appropriate environment or education for its full flowering in human personality. It is inborn, but not in the sense that man is good by nature, as Rousseau and other romantic naturalists had asserted. Man, in fact, is born with two kinds of forces, one that leads to self-preservation, with instincts that lead to aggression, anger, jealousy, fear, drive for sex and the like, and the other that leads to social preservation, like love, affection, sympathy, care, compassion, empathy, consideration for others, rationality, etc. In Freudian terminology, the former tendencies are id-related and the latter, superego-related, and the ego acts as the steering, which controls the two and strikes a balance between them. As per Sigmund Freud, human psyche consists of three parts: id, ego and superego. Id seeks pleasure and is impulsive. The superego acts as the moral guardian, and ego balances the two tendencies so that impulses are expressed in a socially acceptable manner. Moral consciousness is intimately related with social preservation. Therefore, morality or moral consciousness has no meaning and relevance without a social context. If we take care of others' feelings or emotions as we take care of ours, we are morally conscious. If the sorrows or sufferings of others fail to move our hearts in the same manner as the sorrows and sufferings of our own near and dear ones, it signifies that we lack moral consciousness in the same proportion. Such consciousness is innate or inborn, as already pointed out, but its nurturance depends on environmental forces acting on human beings, including education. Some people strongly believe that the most appropriate platform for the consciousness to grow into moral behavior or full-fledged morality is through religion, visit to places of worship, listening to preaching of religious gurus and the like. They believe that there is an intimate and essential relationship between religion and morality. But to many others, such an assertion associating morality with religion is highly contentious. In the next section we shall examine the validity of the assertion with regard to the relationship between morality and religion. Moral education versus religious education. To settle the issue of what is morally worth doing, many people prefer to take the final answer from scriptures like the Gita, the Bible, the Quran or Guru Granth Sahib and the like, or the preachers who hold high offices, the Mathadish, the Shankaracharya, the Maulvi, the priest, the Granthi, etc. For such people, these sources alone are the legitimate authority, which can finally settle the issue of moral conduct. Some denominational schools in India follow this tradition of linking moral education with religious education. They have daily acts of worship, and in the zero period, some religious preaching and anecdotes pertaining to some morals are related. They name it Dharma Shiksha period or religious education period. But, in fact, the word Dharma has got much wider and secular connotation. Dharma is construed by many well-known scholars as righteousness in duty with right conduct, thought and action. Since India has adopted secular democracy as a way of life, such a notion of moral education, which is linked with a particular sect or religion, cannot be accepted as education of the future citizens of the nation. This is because ours is a multi-ethnic, multicultural and multi-religious society. The schools are meant to discharge functions that are free of religious education. The idea behind such a thought is that religion is purely a personal concern of an individual, whereas school is an organ of the total society that aims at the development of intellectual, social, moral skills and attitudes in children. Development of moral aspect of personality is the principal aim of education. But it should not be developed via religious education, because religious education, as we shall discuss below, cannot be truly educational. Let us now study the distinction between moral education and religious education. Distinction between moral education and religious education. It is possible to live without a religion, but it is unthinkable to live without a set of moral values to guide our behavior. There are many people in this world who may not believe in any religion or even in the existence of God, but they do believe in moral values. They may be morally good or even better than many of those who are the followers of a religion. It is for this reason that we talk of secular morality as an approach to morality, which is independent of all religions. So, there is no logical connection between morality and religion. If we wish to link morality with religion, we may involve ourselves in a situation which is positively antagonistic to the concept of education per se. Morality derived from or linked with religion must essentially be authoritarian, because such principles of conduct emanate either from scripture or is dictated by some religious guru. But if we accept a particular code of conduct not because it is recommended by or derived from some particular religious faith but for reasons other than these, rational thinking, for example, then our morality is not a religious one. For instance, we may base our actions on reasons other than religious ones, and accordingly keep a promise, do our duty with sincerity and commitment, speak the truth, etc. Such behavior is not based upon religious morality, and it will not be considered authoritarian because it is based on reasonableness and emerges from the social context. In certain contexts, where telling a lie is in the larger human interest or a behavior can save the life of an innocent individual, one will agree that such a lie will be better than telling the truth. Such a principle can apply very well to other human virtues like non-deceiving, loyalty, non-violence, etc. Don't you remember that even Sri Rama, whom many consider as an incarnation of God, killed Bali? This means that under exceptional circumstances even the so-called universal values can be sacrificed if by doing so, it serves a bigger human cause. Linking morality with religion is unacceptable because it denies the individual the right to choose the principles of morality according to the context of one's own conscience. Such a proposition is unacceptable because it puts a dead end to any evolution or growth of moral knowledge. The fact remains that our moral understanding must be such as to enable us to adjust to meet new moral problems and challenges and to modify our principles to deal with them. But if we link morality with religious authority, changing of moral principles will be inconceivable. To the question of use of contraceptive as a means of birth control, religion is ambivalent. This is a moral problem, the solution of which depends on man's thinking. Otherwise, the problem of overpopulation will be a danger to our survival. Hence we have to leave such questions to rational human judgment. This implies that religion can provide no firm basis for moral decision and action. On the basis of arguments given above, Downey and Kelly, 1982, concluded that a proper morality has to be seen as independent of religion. If there is a connection, it is not that morality is dependent on religious beliefs, it is much more likely that man's religious beliefs are a result of moral consciousness. So we should examine any question of morality independent of religion and on grounds that make it universally acceptable. Theory of morality. We shall discuss briefly the popular theory called the objective theory of good. The objective theory of good. If morality cannot be linked with religion, the question arises, how can we ascertain that some particular action is morally good? In earlier theories, moral precepts were seen as objectively valid, and therefore it was sensible to talk of moral knowledge or knowledge of the good. According to this theory, the base of morality is fixed and objective. It is a view that leads us to the notion that a morally educated person is the one who has recognized the truth of some particular moral values, and she acts on them irrespective of conditions, situations. Such values can be human virtues like truth, non-violence, not deceiving others, to be objective and impartiality, respecting elders, etc. The purpose of education according to such a theory would be to impart instruction with a view to instill these values in pupils. But such a view of morality would obviously be authoritarian and hence not much different from religious morality, which we have already rejected as outmoded. Second, can any one of such virtues be desirable and hence good under all circumstances? We have already maintained that such virtues are not necessarily always desirable, under all conditions. There are other reasons also, why we should not nurture children in accordance with the objective theory of morality. One such reason is grounded in man's freedom. Human beings' freedom of thought, right to her own beliefs cannot be denied. The concept of moral freedom entails notion of human being as an active agent, responsible for her own destiny, and for her action and behavior. Under such a concept of autonomy, if I have a right to act freely or to protect my freedom, for the same reasons I have no right to encroach upon similar freedom of others. And this forms the basis of morality, which is the essence of equity or justice. It implies that man's values must be his own. One loses one's freedom insofar as one acts in accordance with the values that are imposed from without. It is clear, therefore, that our question, what is morality, is a response to the constantly changing demands of the society suited to man as a free and an autonomous being. We must recognize this as a demand for the autonomy of the individuals and a respect for the freedom and autonomy of others. If we believe that we should live in a society comprising of free and autonomous individuals, we also thereby feel an increased need for moral education, a kind of education that must enable students to do their own moral thinking, rather than encouraging them to conform to externally imposed moral codes. Language of morals. Philosophers and other thinkers in the field of ethics have been trying to answer the most fundamental question, the question of what is highest good, the summum bonum, which may be termed as good in itself, or the determining principle in ethical system. As a matter of fact, the different theories in ethics have come up in the manner this question has been answered. For example, according to objectivists, there are certain things, actions, which are good in themselves. The idealist thinkers following this notion assign intrinsic values to concepts like truth, goodness, and beauty. According to them, these values are absolute and hence can be unconditionally followed. On the other hand, the subjectivists, rejecting the objective theory of values, assert that nothing in this world is good without conditions. What we call good is not a quality of the object, situation or action, but rather a subjective perception of the viewer. Something good for me may be bad for others. It may be good in a particular situation or at a particular time but bad in other situations or at other times. According to them, there is no ultimate or absolute good. The utilitarian, taking a slightly different view from the subjectivist, holds that the right or good act is the one which will probably produce the greatest amount of happiness in the world at large. For them, it is happiness that is good in itself. For existentialist thinkers, freedom and autonomy of the will constitute inherent goodness. Any action or situation is good to the extent that it directly or indirectly promotes or is likely to promote freedom and autonomy of the individuals. The basic question that is asked is whether freedom, autonomy, pleasure, happiness, truth, beauty or goodness etc. are good under all conditions and always. A little reflection would reveal that no such thing is good unconditionally. Kant, the great philosopher, having critically examined all such theories of good, stated in one of his categorical imperatives that nothing in this world or out of it is good without conditions except the good will. For Kant, therefore, goodwill is the ultimate good. If we deeply analyze this fundamental question in ethics, we find that the difficulties we encounter in setting up universal principles in search of some value substance arise because of our basic confusion in understanding the distinction between form and content, language and literature, or manner and matter of moral conduct. Any moral conduct has both form as well as content. According to Downey and Kelly, 1982, our mistake in defining moral worthy of some action lies in that we take cognizance of the content, the action, and not its form, the reason that leads to the particular action. According to Peters, 1966, principles of moral behavior are impartiality, consideration for others' interest, freedom, respect for persons and probably truth-telling. But the same fundamental question can be asked again. Are such principles of human conduct good under all conditions? And the answer again is, no, not always and not under all circumstances. So Peter's approach is not different from what Kohlberg called, a bag of virtues approach, to moral behavior. All virtues, in the ultimate analysis, constitute matter or content of morality and not its manner or form. The form of morality. If all virtues constitute the matter or content of morality, what then is the form of it? Some philosophers, Especially the positivists hold that reasonableness or rationality of behavior constitutes the form of moral discourse or moral action. Accordingly, no behavior in a given circumstance can be termed as good if it is not rational or reasonable in that circumstance, even though it is in accordance with the highest virtue that is conceivable. Conversely, any behavior or action that is rational in given circumstances, affected for the sake of attaining a bigger human cause or end, even though what we call human vices, like telling a lie, are used as means to that end, will be decidedly good. That is, if the end is worthwhile or worthy to be pursued, the means do not matter much. It is on the basis of such reasonableness that one can justify why Sri Ram in Ramayana or Sri Krishna in Mahabharata had to adopt wrongful means, because the worthwhile end could have been jeopardized and much evil would have been generated. So it is the reasonableness of an action, its form, and not the action per se, its content, that determines the moral worth of an action. Criteria of rational behavior. In order to understand rationality or reasonableness in fuller perspectives with its implications on moral human conduct, let us explicate the concept of rationality. Hegelian dialectics of rationality is discussed in terms of 4 criteria, which are I. Logical consistency or coherence. E. Generation of universals. E. Empirical evidence in support of the generalizations or good reason to support the same, and IV. Public intelligibility. According to the first criterion, it is necessary that a set of moral beliefs that we have should be internally consistent. For example, it is not rational for me to believe that others should cooperate with me or should take care of my interests, if I do not, at the same time, accept that I must respect others. On the other hand, it will be equally rational, or coherent, if I believe that others need not respect my interests, just as I don't respect theirs. Many people in this world live life according to the latter principle. We may not like their values, content, but we cannot call them rational or irrational, because they show coherence or consistency of behavior. To be called rational, therefore behavior must be coherent and consistent. The second criterion, condition of rational behavior, is generation of universal principles. According to this condition, one must not be guided by a principle today and another tomorrow unless there are cogent reasons for the same. The idea of rational morality entails that one's behavior should be in accordance with certain general principles, whatever these principles may be. According to the third condition of rationality, we should be able to provide empirical evidence or good reasons for what we do. We can say that behavior, for which no valid reasons can be provided, is irrational in the fullest sense. Such behavior cannot be counted as moral. According to the fourth condition, to be truly rational, our behavior should be publicly intelligible or acceptable. If, on the other hand, we tend to behave based on evidences or reasons, which are idiosyncratic, they cannot be termed rational. One example of such behavior can be rationalization, which is contrasted with rationality. In rationalization, the individual tries to justify one's behavior by selective use of evidence or reasons, which seem to be valid but are not true reasons. The proverb, "grapes are sour," rationalizing something as bad because it could not be attained, is an example of rationalization of behavior. Rationality, on the other hand, is based on reasons given objectively and is not colored by one's perceptions. In the final analysis, though rationality cannot provide us with any set of moral principles that we can adopt or act upon, it can, however, tell us a good deal about the form or manner of our moral code. What is meant by form or manner or language of moral code may be clarified. That is, it means that to be rational, our moral code should be coherent, consistent, in the form of general principles, generalizations, subject to evidence that emerges from public understanding of good. Difference between moral instruction, moral training versus moral education. A few illustrations may be added to bring out the differences in a better way. We have seen that moral education is not a matter of instruction in certain moral tenets, nor it is a matter of getting to know certain moral values, which are objective, fixed and unchangeable. It is rather a process of learning to think for ourselves on moral issues, of becoming morally autonomous. While describing the act of teaching, we use terms like instruction, training, conditioning, or even indoctrination and sometimes education. However, one should remember that each of these terms has a definite and a specific meaning. They cannot be used interchangeably. In order to distinguish these terms, let us think of situations where these are appropriately used. According to Peters, 1966, education is concerned with developing autonomy of the individual, where people can think and choose on their own. Education also involves development of a cognitive perspective. The other processes like training or instruction, etc., do not have any such aim. While training somebody in certain skill, say motor driving, we have no consideration for the individual's autonomy. The process of conditioning and indoctrination are still more irrelevant to individuals' autonomy. In these processes there is a deliberate attempt to stifle individuals' autonomy. Attempts made to indoctrinate people into some religious or political social systems are deliberate in nature, and the aim is to prevent people to question the validity of these systems. In the process of education, however, what is important is the development of knowledge and understanding, a kind of cognitive perspective, and also the development of critical awareness. To be educated, therefore, means not only the acquisition of autonomy but also the capacity to use that autonomy effectively. For example, if a person is provided autonomy or freedom to act, but the individual is not fully informed on the subject, the freedom provided will be meaningless. Merely providing freedom of thought does not qualify a person to be educated, unless one is adequately informed on the subject. So education implies an attempt not only to develop pupils' ability to form their own opinion, but also to improve the quality of these opinions. We very well recognize that we do not give proper cognizance to an individual's opinion unless we are convinced that he, she has given proper thought to the matter and knows what he, she is talking about. Another feature of education, to which Peters, 1966, draws our attention is that the activities they are engaged in are worthy of being pursued for their own sake, whereas in the case of other activities like training, instruction, or indoctrination, this is not necessarily the case. To take a case, we can train somebody to perform certain skills without any question of whether he, she values them or not. For example, one can train somebody in skills like pickpocketing or stealing or even torturing somebody. Similarly, one can indoctrinate somebody in accepting dogmas, beliefs, etc., which no rational mind can appreciate. On the other side, it is illogical to speak of a man as educated, and assert that he, she places no value on the knowledge and understanding that he, she has acquired while being educated. There is still another vital element in moral education, which is related with the development of proper human emotions and sentiments, feeling for others, etc. If we do not consider other people's relations, we miss something very significant in moral decisions. Hence, rationality based on objectivity does not exclude human relations. Moral judgments and their criteria. Having examined the nature of morality and moral education, we need to examine an important question of what counts as a moral action. It has two aspects. 1. An action cannot be called moral or not moral unless we establish that the individual has so acted on his, her own, free will. It must be an act that the individual is, in the full sense, responsible for it. If, on the other hand, the individual is coerced or compelled to do by forces beyond his control, and had it been left to his free will, he would probably not have performed it, the individual in such a case cannot be held fully responsible for the act. In such a situation, the act will not be termed moral or immoral. This leads to our second point of consideration. When the question of praise or blame for certain acts performed comes to be examined, we need to see the intention or motive with which the act is performed by the agent. Two further issues need to be considered in this regard. A. Did the agent perform the act because he thought it was right? Or, B. Did he perform because it could bring advantages to him, her? In fact, while making a moral judgment about an act performed by the agent, the action per se is not that important as the will with which the act is performed. Kant probably meant exactly the same thing when he said, "Nothing in this world or out of it is good without conditions except the good will." If an act is performed with a good will, it will be termed as good, irrespective of the consequences of the act. In any court of law also these two principles of goodwill and of free will are considered as the sole criteria for determining whether a person is criminally culpable or not. The judge seeks to ascertain whether the act was done without any coercion, of his own free will, and with what intention, motive was the act done. For any act done under coercion, the doer cannot be held responsible and hence cannot be culpable. Similarly, if the intention is established to be good, but somehow the consequences of the act are harmful to somebody, then the agent will not be criminally culpable. Kant clarifies this point in what he calls action done for the sake of duty, and action done in accordance with duty. Moral goodness can only be assigned to the former but not to the latter. One such example may be of an expert ophthalmologist, an eye surgeon, who gives an advertisement in a newspaper to hold a free eye operation camp for the benefit of the poor people who cannot afford the hospital expenses. Obviously, with such a free operation camp many poor people will be benefited. Nevertheless, the moral worth of it will depend on the intention of the surgeon for organizing the free camp. Some people do it for the sake of their advertisement, for being known to the public so that it may accrue him dividends in the form of helping his business flourish. For them such camps serve as bait. What is crucial to moral behavior is that it should be motivated by the desire to do what is morally or socially desirable and not for the sake of expediency. The action done for the sake of duty is unconditionally good, whereas work done only in accordance with duty possesses no moral worth.